I really wanted to talk about the Democratic side of this because they just continue to not learn and not reflect and say that it's Kamala was a great candidate. It's the American people's fault. Like,
Well,
okay, I mean, see how far you get with that one, because the common denominator here over the span of 12 years, other than, the election that you fraudulently won using COVID, you basically have installed shit candidate after shit candidate that nobody likes over and over and over again. That is either a straight up bitch nobody likes, like Hillary Clinton, a corpse in Joe Biden, or whatever you want to call Kamala Harris.
yeah.
So, and all these things about like, oh, the identity stuff of like, well, she's a black woman with a Jewish. I heard somebody on The View today, a black woman with a Jewish husband. Okay, what are her policies? I am so sick of like this. I would love to vote for a woman for president if her name was Tulsi Gabbard and she was actually qualified. I mean, I would be first in line to vote for a woman president as long as she had morals, values, and was as strong and admirable as a woman of the stature of like a Tulsi Gabbard. I would be willing to do that. That is not Kamala Harris. So when are these people going to learn? They've been defeated by Trump. Like at this point, the common denominator is you guys. You just are not picking. You had Bernie Sanders, who, regardless of whether you think he's like a psycho old guy and his economic policy was ridiculous, everybody loved him. There was a cult following for him, much like Trump on the Democratic side, and the Democrats muzzled him, engineered Hillary being the candidate, and got him right out of there.
Yeah. Well, you've got to realize, man, it's not all their fault. It's the media. It's the media that they listen to. It's the media that they're surrounded with. When that is all the information you hear, and when you do your research on Google, that is the biggest Democratic campaign fund that exists. They donated the most. So, when you're surrounded by legacy news media, Google, Facebook, that blocks half the stuff that they don't want you to see. I mean, not as bad as it used to. You can't blame these people for thinking all this bad stuff that it just isn't true. But, you've got to get them to, I think, at some point, look outside of the regular news, the media that they're seeing and filling their brain with, because it isn't true. Half of the stuff is only partial truths, right? Where you say a little bit of one thing and you cut it, instead of listening to the whole video that was, for example, the fine people on both sides comment. All you had to do was listen to the whole thing to know that's not what he said. So it's just over and over and over again with this style of rhetoric and the media. You can't blame the people, because that's what they're hearing. I mean, obviously it is their fault for listening to that stuff. But, people that have grown up listening to CBS or NBC or ABC, they don't know any better, man. And that's all they're hearing. And that's what they think is true, unfortunately. So I think that's one of the big shifts that we're going to see in this term as well, is people are going to have to be more fair as reporting, or they're going to get canceled. They already are, essentially. You see the ratings for all these news medias down. I saw something earlier today that said something Elon was going to buy CNN for $3 billion. I think it was a hoax type thing, just to kind of poke the bear a little bit. But it would literally take something like that for, and if it's Elon, nobody's going to watch. Those people are probably not going to watch because they're not going to believe it. But that's one of the major talking points that I think when you're trying to reach across to some of these people, that you have to bring up, and you have to get them to look outside of their normal bubble to get their information from, because it's just, a lot of it is just not factual. But again, that's all they hear. I remember him.
We could use him.
Right now, he was one of those guys, man.
Yeah, exactly.
He was one of those guys that did report and said, I forget what he said, something about, but that's what it is. Or I forget how he said it. I kind of remember him. I was young. I was very, very young, but yes, I am old enough to know him.
He's a straight shooter. Yeah, you bring up a good point. The legacy media, which has been dying year in and year out, is dead. I mean, this is, you just said too, like the people that grew up or, were watching those networks throughout the years, which, I mean, even people in their, hell, probably even young 30s at this point grew up having to get their news from them.
Yeah.
But they're just smart enough now and know the other outlets that they're not really looking at that. And the people that have always lived with that legacy media, and when there was a time that you could trust it, they're now aging out though. I mean, we're getting to a point where these generations are going to understand, not that like, oh, I have to get all my news from Joe Rogan and everything that he says on his, because obviously Rogan has fucked a lot of things up too, but he's also not, he's not saying I am the news,
Right.
objectively. So there's plenty of other places to go than legacy media, and people are just not. We know that they're bought and paid for, and there's just no point watching people who need a paycheck from a network who is feeding them opinions and lines to have when there are independent journalists out there that don't give a shit and are not appearing on camera with all this makeup on and have are using scripts and stuff like that. Like there's plenty of people out there. We were just talking about watching election coverage last night. I didn't watch any of the major networks whatsoever. And I watched this, some of you guys in the chat probably even ran across him because he's up to 250,000 subs at this point. But Depressed Ginger is his channel name, and he is a young ginger man. He doesn't seem very depressed. He seems like a good guy. But he had tremendous election coverage last night.
Yeah.
All of his predictions came true. He had Trump winning all of the swing states. He nailed every single side of it, and he's just an authentic dude on there being himself. And I'm like, and here we have all these other people that have been like pontificating on this stuff for weeks that are completely wrong. All the major networks like adding in all this narrative that we don't need to know at all. And here's this dude just on YouTube with that kind of following doing a great job,
Yeah.
I think we're going to continue to see stuff like that.
Yeah, I think so too. And it'll just gain popularity. And I think, like I said, I think as people start to realize that they've been lied to, and a lot of the false narratives that they say he's going to do when they don't come true, it's going to just add a little bit to that, where people may start reaching out to other options and other opinions. There, like I said, like you said, there are some very good independent journalists out there that you got to check multiple sources, and if you don't, then you're only fooling yourself.
Yeah.